Here we are with the much awaited 1K sub Q&A session, so I can finally stop bugging all of you about it with the YouTube and Twitter post, again at ZirionVN if you want to follow me on there. No idea if this actually reached anyone, although since we have a handful of questions, I assumed it worked to some extent. I didn't plan on doing anything special at first, but decided that this would be a nice little thing to do to recognize the milestone. I pretty much left it open to anything, but plenty of these did end up visual novel related, which is totally understandable since that was where the channel started, and is still definitely going to be a part of continuing forward. If some of you viewers had any questions you didn't ask this time around, feel free to pop in about it the next time I do a Q&A. I posted asking for questions on my Twitter and the YouTube post, and will probably do so next time as well. Anyhow, since we didn't get too many, I'll probably run through every question. Unless you ask multiple, then I'll just pick whichever I feel like responding to. This won't be very scripted, so I'll just be reading and answering the questions as honestly as I can. The background is just gonna be some random footage of Sakura no Uta. Anyways, let's get to it. The first question we have is from Charles Meteo, which asks, how did you get into the Rant series? Fair question. To answer this one requires a bit of diving into the past. Many years ago, when I couldn't read Japanese, I just started getting into visual novels with translated ones like, Fate Stay Night, Bratz Restoration, several others. Pretty much played whatever I want regardless of quality. You know how it is. New genre, got super excited. Some were good, some were pretty bad. This was back at a time when honestly, there weren't too many visual novels being translated at all. The only official ones we got were pretty much all mediocre. Stuff like Lightning Warrior Raidi, Snow Sakura, Private Nurse. Fan translations were the ones tackling anything of actual substance, and even then, there weren't too many of these floating around. Another thing to note is that I came from a background of just loving video games of all kinds in general. I grew up playing GBA, SNES, N64, GameCube, PS2, PlayStation, all sorts of consoles. So when I stumbled upon Yandere Translations, who were translating Sengoku Rants way back in the day, and found out that this VN genre I was trying to get hooked on had VN game hybrids, needless to say I was super interested. It also helped that I thought Sengoku Rants had really great gameplay, music, story, characters, and all that good stuff. And overall, I just thought it was a dang good game and really enjoyed playing it. Later in life, when I self-learned Japanese, that's when I actually started to play the rest of the Rant series. If any of you are curious about why I like Rants, again, I did a pretty long, comprehensive video covering that during the end of Z Memories, which you can check. As for the second part, no, I haven't played Distorted Travesty 3, but I do indeed love platformers, action games, and honestly, I'm pretty open to most genres. Okay, second question by Joe Breeze, who asks, what got you into anime? So I actually have a pretty fun answer for this. When I was really young, like preschool age, I found a literal treasure chest made out of wood stashed in the house I used to live in. Inside that wooden treasure chest was a ton of VHS tapes, which some of you might be too young to know what they are, but think of it as the thing before DVDs. Anyways, on these VHS tapes were a bunch of TV shows recorded, and the one that hooked me the most was one called Yu Yu Hakusho. Still one of my favorite animes to this day. Yusuke Urameshi is my boy, and yeah, that's pretty much what started my love for anime. After watching a couple of these old tapes, I pretty much went from there. Why one of my family members stored these VHS tapes in a literal treasure chest is beyond me, but it always makes for a funny memory in my opinion. Next up, we have Glorious Showoff, who asked, we all know you're a huge fan of the Rant series. Yeah, true. And when it comes to the Dai series, have you tried playing Daikuji? If so, what are your thoughts about it? In fact, as a whole, do you have experience with some of Alisoft's more lesser known games, so on and so forth? Okay, a bit of a long one, but I'll answer it one by one. Yes, I've played all of the Dai series, Dai Teikoku, Dai Bancho, and Daikuji. I actually have not played Daikuji nearly as extensively as I played the other two, which I both pretty much 100%ed. Daikuji I only played partway through. Definitely can see where the series started, that said, I had some trouble running it back in the day, music kept cutting out, it crashed many times, so I haven't played that one that much. As for Alisoft's other games, yeah, I've played a few. Toshin Toshi 3, for instance, Mama Toto, Dorapeko, Gaozu Island, just to name a few. I'm not gonna talk about every single game in detail because quite frankly, that would take way too much time. You'll just have to wait until I get around to tackling them potentially in the future someday. For now, I will say, I have always enjoyed the fact that when Alisoft makes a gameplay-focused visual novel game, usually a pretty strong amount of effort is put into the music, story, and especially the gameplay. In doujin groups where sometimes the gameplay aspect of a visual novel is handled very poorly, Alisoft sticks out in that most of the time, I enjoy playing the game as an actual game. Not always the case, but usually. Also, I do enjoy the supremely confident protagonist with actual character, which Alisoft puts out, along with the pretty absurd humor they have, which is pretty unique to them. Okay, so the next question is by Mr. Chubby Cheeks, who asks, are there any visual novel companies that you will play any game they produce? This might surprise some of you since I just got done confirming my enjoyment of Alisoft games, but my answer to this question is actually a solid no. Every single doujin group who makes visual novels, not every VN or game or whatever they're going to produce is going to have the kind of themes I enjoy, or even be that good necessarily. Alisoft, who I definitely have enjoyed several of their games, have also released a bunch that I have absolutely no interest in playing, like Little Princess, or more recently, Sumami Gui or Haha Ranman or other such titles. Alisoft sometimes have these games which lean more heavily on the 18+ side, and I'm just not too interested in them personally. This idea pretty much stretches to any company in general. Everyone releases stinkers every now and then, or even games I might personally not be interested in because of the themes presented. I love Nitro Plus, Steins Gate, and so forth, but that doesn't mean I want to play Drakoi. Yuno is absolutely fantastic, but it doesn't mean I want to play the other Elf brand games. I think you get my point. Now, are there series that I enjoyed the previous games enough to give the sequels in the future a chance, should they ever come out? Yes, sure. If a new Dai series came out, I'd be super interested in playing it. A new Aeon no Acelia sequel, yes, count me in. Even then though, I'd still judge the game on its own merits, and if it ain't good, I might not be interested in playing the later entries. Next up is 4 questions by Raven. Alright, I'm gonna skip the 2 I don't find too interesting, so let's go with the middle 2. First off, what is the best Nuki Gay you played? Alright, Nuki Gays, for those who don't know, are visual novels where the 18+ content is front and center, and the focus of the entire game, with plot being an afterthought. Now, the term Nuki Gay is a little bit broad, as evidenced by the fact that I don't think the tag on VNDB is that accurate. Like, are usually games Nuki Gays? Don't think so. For me personally, I consider a Nuki Gay to be something that has absolutely no story, and you really are there just to move from H scene to the next H scene. With that definition, no, I don't really have an answer. Now, if we were to instead talk about visual novels with very strong 18+ elements, then I do have an answer. I think the most surprising VN I've ever played, where I came in assuming the worst, but came out incredibly surprised, was Mon Mosu Quest or Monster Girl Quest. A trilogy of games that also has a sequel trilogy where the final game is still currently being made. Monster Girl Quest is a series that taught me not to be deceived by appearances. Talk about a game where it somehow has some of the weirdest 18+ content I've ever seen in my entire time playing these VN Doujin games, yet also one of the most surprisingly solid stories underneath it all. That a VN game with the tagline of, watch Luca, how do I say this? Forced without his consent to bone monster girls as the main focus, is actually a deconstruction of a classic hero's tale, complete with badass fights and crazy reveals. That isn't to say that the 18+ content isn't a big part of the game as well, because there's an absolute ton of it, and these monster girls aren't like cute cat-eared girls, but actual monsters like eldritch abominations that are literally devouring our main boy most of the time. I have no love for the 18+ content of the game. If you enjoy it, that's your prerogative. I find it weird enough that even back when I was a completionist, I still ended up skipping a good chunk of it since it was a little too much for me. With that said, I would still love to talk about the series, since I think the underlying story is actually really cool. And the fact that it has this story alongside all these wild 18+ elements is what makes MGQ so special, although I imagine it's going to be pretty tough to make a video on it thanks to all the stuff that is in the game. As for RPG Maker games, I have a lot of respect for the Japanese RPG Maker games, and would probably love to talk about some of them in the future. I think there are some very crazy stories some of these indie developers are able to make using the RPG Maker engine. Even Corpse Party started as an RPG Maker game way back when. Now, as for the 18+ focused ones on Steam, yeah, I mean, sure. I think the rise of these sorts of games on Steam really paint a bad picture of the Japanese RPG Maker scene in general, not just because of the games they choose, but also how they choose to market it. every single one of these games on Steam are like, oh look, lots of anime titties. Are there a lot of 18 plus focused Japanese RPG Maker games out there? Yes. More are getting released on sites like DL Site every single day. And while a handful of them are solid games in their own right, many of them are just excuses to watch 18 plus scenes. With that said, if you are introducing a new genre to an audience, I would hope they would put their best foot forward, as opposed to starting off the Japanese RPG Maker section of the internet as another one of Japanese weird H stuff to laugh at. Now, I've got one more YouTube question, but I'll save that for last, so let's move on to the Twitter ones for now. First one comes from Utter Guy with a Gachaman profile picture, which I respect, who asked, how do you feel about Kickstarter VN localizations such as Claned, Grisaya, Muv-Luv, DSERI, VBF, etc.? You think these are effective ways to market and fund these projects, while also maintaining a good relationship with customers? Okay, so a little more complicated of a question. I'm no expert here when it comes to marketing, so this will just be a casual response from a consumer, but I think Kickstarters are a good way of funding official translations that otherwise would probably never see the light of day without the direct support of the consumer. It can also indeed be a great platform for connecting with your consumers, although I will say that Kickstarter can also be a platform rife with exploitation. As for whether these companies actually do a good job with making posts and keeping their backers updated, I have no idea. Even when I back games, I don't really check these posts. However, as for whether it is good marketing, no. I think Kickstarters are just one part of whatever the group, company, person running the Kickstarter needs to do in order to market their visual novels. And this is where I think both VN creators and publishing companies do a very terrible job in general when it comes to the international market, which I don't think is entirely their fault in the sense that they are on a very uphill battle, because as I mentioned during the first question, visual novels have long been solidified in the mainstream media as that very weird Japanese thing where you date anime girls and then bone them. And it doesn't help that most of the games that come out on Steam or other platforms just kind of reinforce that idea, where they always advertise like, wow, look at them anime titties, or play this game so you can date all of these cute girls. Like, all of them use this as a primary mechanism to draw newcomers, which just reinforces this idea. Visual novel fans know that these 18 plus factors are a minuscule fraction of what makes up a visual novel, but the general audience doesn't. And many companies see this, and instead of thinking about new ways to advertise the product, they just don't even try, or purely market directly towards this already niche audience. Sometimes they even outsource the translation to third-party publishers like Soccer Game, who completely butcher their work for a cheap buck. Now, I'm gonna be honest in saying that I don't have the answers to these questions. I'm sure if I did, someone much smarter than me probably would have implemented them already, but I would love to see the day when VNs are enjoyed by everyone. A part of this channel in the first place was meant to introduce visual novels to non-visual novel fans, which is also why I wanted to branch out so that we can get people who enjoy all sorts of video games together, niche or otherwise. Visual novel, indie, mainstream, and whatsoever. Okay, so next up, Scooby-Doo asks, were there any visual novels that didn't meet your expectations that are extremely praised, but you simply found them mediocre / downright bad? This is kind of a loaded question in the sense that it's going to provoke fans of whatever game I call out, so I'll say this even though I know it's pointless and people are going to get mad anyways. Me not liking a game is not an attack on you personally. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean I think people who do are dumb or anything. As I always say, you do you. With that said, I'm always going to give my honest opinion on something. I may not be right all the time, but the opinions I put out in these videos are what I truly think about the game, and if you don't like that, you are always free not to listen to it. Okay, now that I said my piece, let's go talking about Venus Blood Frontier again quickly. I said this in the video I did on it already, but I did not like Venus Blood Frontier. I didn't enjoy the main themes, I found the music to be average, I found the gameplay to be pretty mediocre and kind of janky. Someone laughed at me for complaining about the static sprites, saying how it's funny I'm complaining about such an ancient game. Even though Venus Blood Frontier came out in 2012, my expectations weren't really betrayed in the sense that I knew coming in I wasn't going to enjoy the whole corruption and tentacle aspect very much, but I still was looking forward to the gameplay and story, and overall found them both to be pretty lacking. Even though I had watched every interaction scene, corrupted ones included, skipping only the 18+ CGs because I did not want to see them. Several people told me my opinions were wrong because I didn't watch Freya getting her tits milked, that I missed some super vital character development. So even though I knew what I was about to see, yeah, I went back and watched all of it, and to the surprise of some people, I guess, didn't really change my opinion. Feels like they were just trying to find ways to say I was wrong, even though I don't think the 18+ scenes really added anything that I didn't already get from the other interaction scenes. Anyways, look, if you enjoyed VBF, great, I'm happy you did, I didn't. Finally, the last question is from Subdude, who asked 3 questions. Since it's 3, I'm just gonna answer all of them really fast without clarifying too much. First off is favorite games that are not RPGs or visual novels. Okay, that's a tough one, mostly due to the no RPG clause, which is a very broad genre like MMORPGs, action RPGs. Does Final Fantasy 15 count as an RPG? Anyways, if we don't restrict it to Japanese, I really like Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos and Frozen Throne, an RTS that I pretty much grew up on and played for many years. If we're talking about strictly Japanese developed games though, God Hand on the PS2 was really fun and had that absolutely off-the-wall comedy, which I'm always a huge fan of. The Metal Gear Solid series is also pretty fantastic, including Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Watching Kojima try to craft the most insane story is an amazing experience to behold. He really rides the line between taking it super seriously and at the same time trying to make it as absurd as humanly possible. Second question, Japanese games you're looking forward to the most that aren't out yet. I suppose I want to play Digimon Survive since I really love Devil Survivor 2 and Digimon Survive looks to be extremely similar. Shin Megami Tensei 5 looks like it might be some fun, although I really hope they mix up the whole law and chaos aspect of the series, since by SMT4 I really felt like the concept has gotten kinda stale. Hopefully moving to the Switch brings some new life to the series. Finally, the third question, favorite visual novel with the gameplay system would be... yeah, that would be Rant's X Kasen. I think it's one of the best games I've ever played, not just restricted visual novels, just in general, and I really like it. So yeah, that was my Q&A session. I hope you enjoyed listening to me answer your questions. I tried to give honest and decently comprehensive answers. If any of you have any more questions, I'll probably do this in the future, maybe when I reach a new milestone or whenever I feel like it, and we have enough questions to do this again. Really, I hope the channel moves in a direction where we have equal parts of VN questions, as well as talking about other genres and even completely different mediums, since I just love talking about video games, light novels, and whatever in general. Thanks for all the support up until now, and I'll see you later, till next time.